The NBA MVP race has just gotten very, very interesting, and it all centers around not only Joel Embiid, but new rules that have been put into place into the awards races this year. But this discussion is not just about those rules, but some very weird unintended consequences that could directly impact Joel Embiid. Now, in case you're not aware, the NBA put in a new rule that began this year that said that in order to make an All-NBA team, win MVP, win the major awards, you have to play in at least 65 of the 82 games, and you have to play significant minutes in at least 65 of the 82 games. They wanted to make sure that the guys that were winning these awards, that were making All-NBA teams, were playing at least 65 of the 82. It felt like a fair number. It felt like, okay, it's not like you have to play 75 or 80 games to qualify for these things, but 65 is the cutoff. And this is important because guys getting these awards directly impacts what contracts they can or can't get. Not only in terms of like, are they worth the contract, but they can actually make more money on a maximum salary if they make an All-NBA team, or a couple of them, or of course they win the MVP. And this directly relates now to the season that we're having with Joel Embiid. And everybody is talking about this. I'm not just going to break this down like everybody else. We're going to talk about some extra stuff on top of this as well. But we kind of have to have a foundation here first, right? So Embiid's not going to play 65 games, which means he's going to be ineligible for the MVP award. Right now, as of the recording of this video, while Embiid has been healthy through the first, a little bit over the half of the season, he is the MVP of the league. It's close, but it's not as close as maybe it's been in recent years. Joel Embiid's the MVP. He's been one of the most dominant players in the league. He's been incredibly consistent on a night-to-night basis in terms of with the games that he actually plays, at least. And if the season ended today, as of this recording, I think Joel Embiid would win the MVP award, but he is not going to be eligible to win it. Now, we can have a different conversation about whether Joel Embiid is the best player in the league, or maybe even the best big in the league. That's fine. We can have that discussion maybe a different day, but I don't think it's that arguable. Even in a season in which we're having guys put up crazy scoring performances, the talent across the league is unbelievable right now. Embiid would be the MVP. But because of these new rules they put in place, he will not be eligible. And this is starting to become an issue for a couple of different reasons. One, it's taking away kind of the human component of voting on these awards. And two, it might have actually caused Joel Embiid to get injured. So one, let me just ask you this question, okay? If, let's just say theoretically, Joel Embiid had as good of a season as he's been having, and he played 65 games exactly on the nose, he would win the MVP award. If he had this kind of a season and played 65 games, he would win it, at least in my opinion. I think that's kind of the general consensus at the moment. If he missed one extra game, if he played 64 instead of 65, is he any less the MVP because he played one less game than he would be had he played 65 games? And that was always the issue with this cutoff, with this actual threshold of games that needed to be met, because the point of it was they wanted to limit load management. They wanted the stars to play. It's not the only rule they put into place this year to try and force stars to play, but it kind of operated under this assumption that's not true, that voters don't already account for games missed when it comes to All-NBA or MVP. It was rare. It still happened, but it was rare for guys to make All-NBA teams playing some number of games in like the 50s. Steph did it. It's rare, but it does happen. But a lot of times, voters are already taking into account your availability, the number of games played, into whether or not you're going to make an All-NBA team. You could be awesome for half the year if you play 40 games, unless you are out of control, like dropping 35, 39 points a night, you're not going to make an All-NBA team. This was already something that was accounted for. And by putting in an actual threshold, the NBA has forced this weird situation where not only you could have a situation where a guy plays 64 games, was the best player in the league, and doesn't win the MVP when the one game difference doesn't really matter. And two, the situation that I think just happened with Joel Embiid, I think he played when he wasn't healthy, partially because of some of the criticism that he has gotten. He missed the game in Denver. He missed another game after that. And then he played against Golden State, and he should not have. He clearly was not healthy, was not moving well. He was barely getting up and down the floor, did not look like himself. And I wonder if he would have played in that game without this MVP threshold thing. Now, granted, he probably wasn't going to get there anyway. I think he would have had to play all but 5 games the rest of the season, so it's unlikely anyway. But I think there was extra criticism put on him for missing games because people thought that he should win the MVP, but then he wouldn't because of this new threshold. I wouldn't be surprised if this rule wasn't in place if Embiid would not have played against Golden State. You can say that's a good or a bad thing if you want. Maybe you think guys should be playing more even through injuries, but I think Embiid got hurt worse in that that Golden State game than he was coming into the game when he was already injured. And that's the unintended consequence of all of this. I totally understand the mindset if you're the NBA of trying to get your stars to play more. They want less load management. It is absolutely brutal. If you are a fan in Denver and you want to go see Jokic and Embiid, it's probably the most expensive ticket of the year. That's the one game you're going to, and you spend all this money and you show up and Embiid doesn't play. That is a brutal customer experience, and it's one that the NBA does not want, whether it be on TV or in person. I totally get that mindset, but I don't think that this rule is operating the way that they actually want it to, because if it results in your stars potentially getting hurt, it's not a very good rule. Now, obviously, what the NBA would say is if you're not healthy, do not play. This is to prevent guys from skipping and resting on games when they shouldn't. That's fine, but I still think it has an impact on guys like Embiid that want to make the All-NBA team. How weird would it be? Let's say Embiid plays 55. Let's say he plays 60 games. How weird would it be to look back 10 years from now and see the All-NBA teams that Embiid has made and be like, man, he didn't make the 2024 All-NBA team. That's weird. I wonder why. Oh, he played 7 less games than he was supposed to make the thing. It's just not really gonna make sense, is it? And so I'm starting to have a real issue with this rule because, again, implementing the rule in the first place, to me, assumes that voters did not account for games missed at all. And as someone that makes an All-NBA team every year, obviously I don't have a vote, but as someone that makes All-NBA teams every year, that kind of makes like a fake MVP ballot every year, I'm looking at games missed. So if I'm doing it, I know that people whose votes actually matter are accounting for games missed. And you cannot convince me that a season goes from MVP worthy at 65 games and not MVP worthy at 64 games. That, to me, having that actual threshold in place makes absolutely no sense. And it was an issue even before the season started. Then honestly, the only counter argument to that is if you want to, for the MVP award specifically, if you want to qualify most valuable player as this guy also has to be extremely available. It's hard to be the most valuable player, to add the most value to your team of any player in the entire league. It's hard to do that and be that guy and play in 55 games. Like if you're going to actually provide a ton of value, you also need to be available. That's fine. That's a totally valid point. So let's just say that Embiid plays 55, 60 games, whatever, okay? You get to the end of the year, it's time to write down your MVP voting. Let's say it's between Jokic and Embiid, and Jokic has played 78 games and Embiid has played 55, and it's pretty close in terms of their actual value to the team. Okay, then give Jokic the MVP award, that's fine. But in that scenario, you have the opportunity to sit down, look at it and say, okay, was Embiid's season so much better that it makes up for a lack of availability? In this current system, you do not have that option. Embiid is just not on the ballot, nor will he be available on the All-NBA ballot, and that's the case for a lot of different guys. And I understand that this is a little bit of a unique situation because, again, the point of the rule was to prevent rest and load management, and I get that, but it shouldn't be forcing guys to play when they are very clearly hurt, potentially risking more injury. And generally speaking, people that vote on this are smart enough to decide for themselves what a proper number of missed games is. It's a rule that we never needed and honestly overcomplicates a situation that it was meant to simplify. Now, at the end of the day, Embiid might play 45 games this year, and none of this might matter, and it might be just a discussion, right, to think about for the future. But this is going to be a thing. There is going to be a year, whether it's this year or otherwise, that a guy plays 64 games and is the MVP of the league and doesn't win the award. It's going to happen. It just is. Once we get to, a certain amount of years, it just inevitably, it will happen. Maybe it could have been this year. Maybe it still will. I'm not sure. But I would prefer a system, and I think this makes more sense, a system in place that allows for a little bit of wiggle room on games missed, because we know when guys are resting and when they're actually hurt, when they have a legitimate injury. And if you want to, penalize a guy for missing games due to rest and he can't win the MVP, that's fine. I just think that voters should have the choice. It should not be written in stone that says 64 versus 65 eligible versus ineligible. That irritates me. That bugs me because it insinuates that the people that do this aren't smart enough to figure out the value of availability and the value of games played. So at the end of the day, it's very likely that by the end of the season, we are going to have an awards sheet, an awards ballot that basically makes it look like Joel Embiid didn't play this season. He's not going to be on an All-NBA team. He's not going to be on an MVP ballot at all. Like, that's another thing that we look at throughout history. We look at all NBA teams, and then you can look at who received votes and kind of account for that within their career. Even if Embiid plays 55 games, he would still place in the top 5 in the MVP voting in a normal year. None of that stuff is going to be there. And I don't really know why it bothers me. Maybe it's just going back and making some historical videos on some of my other channels and, like, you know, relying on some of that information and having that in front of me to kind of build resumes for guys. I don't know what it is, but it's such a, quite frankly, it's such a stupid rule, and it's immediately coming into play this year, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue in the future as well.